Well, look at the natural environment. We say, the earth is something that we all share and own in common. The air is something that we all share and own in common. The water of the earth is something we all share and own in common. I would suggest that the airwaves that carry these messages of either sustainability or consumerism, a thriving future, a dying future, the airwaves belong to all of us, and they should be used to serve the well-being of the whole. And currently, they're being used to serve the interests of corporations and not the interests of the earth, of other species, and our long-term future. So then, to me, that becomes a political issue. That's why it's political. And in the United States, at least, the people own the airwaves. The people at the metropolitan scale, let's say the scale of San Francisco or Seattle or Los Angeles, at that scale, people own the airwaves. And so once again, I say, let's take back the airwaves, combine those airwaves and the power and the reach of the airwaves with the specificity and the engagement of the internet. Put those two together and you have the makings of a new conversation that can actually awaken the global brain, move us into a new world of thriving, hopefully, possibility.
But how do you do this? I mean,
how do you
start? How do you get them to release them? I mean, 'cause as I say, there's so much vested interest. They're going to say, oh yes, Duane, nice idea, thank you very much, and we're going to continue doing what we're doing.
Yes.
How do you make any inroads into this?
Right. Wonderful question. I'm asked this often. People say, well, this is complete idealism. This is fantasy to think you could make any change in the system. And what I say to people is, let's go back a quarter of a century. And a quarter of a century ago, I was a co-founder of two nonprofits here in the San Francisco Bay Area, transpartisan or nonpartisan organizations, both. And we were working for a new level of citizen empowerment and new level of citizen conversation. And we went into the ABC television station. And we had representation from business and labor, from the rich for the poor, different ethnic groups in the Bay Area, the League of Women Voters, and others. And we said, we are here not as a special interest, but we represent the entire viewership of the Bay Area. We want an hour of prime time. And we want prime time in which to have a mature conversation as a society, as a community. And because we own the airwaves, that's exactly what we got. We had got an hour of prime time. And during that hour, we had over 300,000 people watching this program, this electronic town meeting. And we had 6 votes from a pre-selected scientific sample, a random sample of citizens all over the Bay Area. And 6 times during the course of an hour, they got to vote. It wasn't just sit back and watch, they got to vote. And how they voted then changed the conversation happening in the television studio. So my point is, a quarter of a century ago, we demonstrated that we could take back the airways, we could have a conversation with hundreds of thousands of people, we could test the sentiments of the body politic, and what we've seen is that we already have the capacity for a revolution in communication if we will use it. And so then that's where I come back to the politics of consciousness, if you will.
Except the technology is also moving there now. It's interesting what's happening with the system in England now. You can, and it's not live yet, but they're talking about doing this now, is you can begin to vote in programs, and it's all gathered together by the station, and it's displayed live, whatever's coming up. And also they can begin to monitor how many people are actually watching a program, so you can see the ratings go up and down live, which starts giving you instant feedback of what's going on. But that's the technology. But talk about the politics.
The technology is critical to inform the politics. For example, without the internet revolution that we now have, we wouldn't be able to connect with one another and call for a new generation of let's say, television programming. Conversely, the television programming would be completely passive without the engagement and participatory capacity of this new technology. So once again, what I'm suggesting is we're moving right now into a new world of communication. And if we need communication at the local to genuinely the global level, we have the technology to accomplish that. But what's required is for us to step up as global citizens, not just citizens of, let's say, the San Francisco Bay Area, but citizens of the nation and earth, and call for a conversation about our common future. Because as we've talked, that future is profoundly in peril.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know, I sense there's a sort of quality of they have to change, they have to make different programming. And I think, you know, what we're doing here is we are creating in a very small way our own programming.
That's right.
And it's a free market. If
That's
people
right.
like this, they'll watch it. It may even get syndicated, who knows. If they don't like it, if it's boring, they'll turn off, and probably some people already have, and they've gone. But there's a free market, and my feeling is we need to have more people generating really good content rather than saying the system has to change and the system has to start producing better content. If the people really want this better content, then if we produce it, and I think the way the whole media is going, it's going to be much more you choose what you want to watch, where, from, like on YouTube now. You know, you go on YouTube, I don't know how many millions of videos there are there. And, you know, some very popular, but you may have your own particular niche. You know, if you're interested in alternative energy systems, you may watch videos on that. You can watch anything.
Yes.
And I think that's the real democratization of the media, is having everything available. And then the free market says what becomes popular according to what people actually like to watch.
Right. Now, that's the free market of ideas in the world of the internet.
But I think internet and television are going to become the same. There's going to be no difference in 5 years.
In
no
5 years, perhaps maybe 10 years. But
I think the way things are going, 5, I think.
My sense is if we wait those 5 to 10 years for television and the internet to converge and for the TV sets and technologies to all be in place so that we can have these conversations, my sense is it's going to be too late. It's already way late in the evolutionary game as I see it. And it's time now, I feel, for us to step up with a level of conversation that really challenges climate policy, energy policy, species extinction policy, and all the rest, and move these forward because we seem to be settling more for a return to the old normalcy, kind of business as usual as the sort of mindset of the media and business. So what I'm thinking is, well, how can we be generative in this situation? How can we be catalytic? And what would it bring? Well, maybe it is not a change in the technology and politics, but a change in the story about how those technologies are used in our new politics. But what I see is a need for up-leveling the conversation to meet the level of challenge that we're facing as a human family.
So let's talk about how do we do that? How do we up-level the conversation?
Yeah.
How do we get this moving, this political thing? Because from what you're saying is, I mean, ideally, your vision would be in a year's time, you know, we have a lot more of this, you know, real global important conversation happening on the main ABC, CNN.
Well, it would. Now, let's look at this. I mean, in my mind, power in a democracy is the power to communicate. And most people don't have the power to communicate except in a very small, fragmented way. And we're talking about the power to communicate very broadly. And I've looked at history, and with history as an example, for example, Boris Yeltsin, when he took a stand for democracy in Russia, it was during the overthrow of they were overthrowing the government. They were, and it was a challenge. Who is going to control the emergence of democracy in Russia? Well, when he took his stand, he was standing on tanks in front of the television towers there in Russia. When Corazon Aquino was in the Philippines and she took her stand for democracy, where was she? She was in front of and guarding the television stations. That's where power was. Lech Walesa of Poland was interviewed once about the revolution of democracy in Poland and those surrounding countries. And he during the course of the interview, he said, he pointed across the room at the TV set and he said, it all came from there. So my feeling is, if we're going to have genuinely a revolution in democracy, and to me democracy means the freedom to speak freely, to have conversations with our brothers and sisters around the world, and then petition for redress of grievance, to say we've got changes that we want made. If we're going to have that kind of conversation, we need to do what Boris Yeltsin and Corazon Aquino and others have done, and that is take a stand with how we use television. Now, I know that the internet is the current darling of the media, actually, and it is not popular to say this about television. But I do feel that it's still the dominant tool being used by our mass society, and if we're going to have a mass change in our mass mind, we need a mass conversation, and that is the place for it to happen. And for that to happen, we need to, in my estimation, take back the airwaves.
So, what can people do? How you know? We're talking about it. It's a nice idea.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean in practice? How do we do that?
In practice, it means in communities across the country to say, look, we're in transition. The world's in transition. Our community is in transition. Let's have transition television that goes along with the transition in our communities as we work towards a more resilient, sustainable future. So what we can do is say, well, let's come together as members of a community. And that means Republicans and Democrats, the rich, the poor, everyone. We all have a stake in a democracy that communicates with itself. So it would be to come together, create a community-wide organization like we did, a community voice organization. It was Bay Voice in the San Francisco Bay Area. How about Cascadia Voice in Seattle, and so on. A community voice organization that says we have really one mission, and that is to bring the people of this community together in conversation about our common future, and then let the chips fall where they may. So that's a revolution that's already got started more than a quarter of a century ago. It's waiting to unfold, I think, now.
So what's it going to look like, do you think? What's the programming? Do you have ideas of how it could look? I mean, we talk about the topics.
Well, see, for example, imagine that instead of letting the issue of climate just slide off the radar screen of our social agenda, what if we were having conversations at within the San Francisco Bay Area, and the people of the Bay Area said, Mr. Governor, Mr. President, we want this brought back to the forefront of political conversation. Or we spoke back to the governor. We said, we want investments in solar technology and green technology on the table for jobs as well as for a green future. There are many ways that this could impact the future of the political process.
Right. Well, it's an absolutely fascinating conversation, and we'll see how it goes. But also fascinating that here we are on television, using television to air this conversation, and who knows what seeds we're sowing.
Yeah.
And if any of you have your own comments on this, please actually let us know. You can go to peteandduane.com, and there you can actually let us know your own comments on the show, which we'd always be very happy to receive.
Yeah, be great to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.